there had been a lot of transmigration of Azeris into Nagorno-Karabakh. By then, the Azeri government had put a lot over the border, but they were still 75% Armenian in Nagorno-Karabakh. And when, in the late 80s, when the Soviet Union imploded, then the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, they were still a Soviet of Nagorno-Karabakh, they voted for union with Armenia.
So how important is the learning lesson of Sungait? Do you think if we had a more robust international framework at the time, we could have prevented the escalation of the conflict, or was it inevitable?
I don't think. It was probably inevitable as a result of Stalin's misplacing of Nagorno-Karabakh that old ethnic hostilities will boil up. Sungait was simply the beginning of a racial war, which, because it was a war which Armenia won, meant that not only Nagorno-Karabakh was safe, but Armenia took a number of buffer zones, as it called them, which were legitimately in Azerbaijani territory. So that if the post-war process had worked in 1994, you would have had a deal. Nagorno-Karabakh would have been accepted either as part of Armenia or as an independent republic, and some of the buffer zone that had been taken in the war would have been returned to Azerbaijan. But the Minsk process, as it was called, set up in 1994, never proceeded. And why not? I think because there was a kind of acceptance, there was a line of control with Karabakhi and Armenian forces on one side and Azeris on the other, and they occasionally shot at each other, but there were no big incidents. But also because Nagorno-Karabakh should have been part of that peace process, and the Azeris wouldn't allow it. So that was, it seems to me, the fundamental unfairness of the Minsk process and the reason why ultimately it didn't proceed, it didn't get anywhere. And now we have a full-blooded invasion by Azerbaijan, supported by Turkey, against, and it's sad, because, partly because it is a religious war to some extent. The Muslim forces raid against the Christians, but it is, I would put it on a broader scale than that. It is a racial conflict that has been exacerbated by Stalin's misplacement and the growing, there is a lot of evidence actually that Armenians and Azeris got along as neighbors perfectly well in these long years, both in the occupied territories and in Nagorno-Karabakh. And it was only when Haidar, who became the leader of Azerbaijan, started indulging in this nationalist rhetoric, nationalist populism, a deeply corrupt man who started shouting that the Armenians had committed genocide against the Azeris, which no historian or lawyer would ever accept, but it whipped up latent hatreds, which you see played out today as they kill the civilians of Stepanakert.
So, and would you say the Minsk process is obsolete? We need a new framework? Do you need new countries to engage? And can we use a bilateral process, or should it really take a UN-based approach?
Well, the UN has these resolutions which it must reconsider.
Okay,
And
but then please, I would really be interested if you can help us understand what is the process of reconsidering or even revoking and amending these resolutions.
we have a war going on. Forces that will use barbaric means, and we've seen war crimes already, are within a few miles as we speak of Stepanakert, and they have and they will continue to kill its civilians until the Azeris, as they see it, regain their sovereignty. Now, I put that sovereignty in question. I don't think they are the sovereign rulers. I think the area has seceded long ago, and certainly by now. And we need a ceasefire, and we need a resolution, ceasefire pending perhaps a United Nations reference of the issue to the International Court of Justice, which is the highest court in the world and which is a specialist on sovereign borders. So that is one possibility: stop the war, get a binding decision, which might take a year or two, from an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice as to whether Nagorno-Karabakh is entitled to the status of a de facto independent republic, because I think it can prove that it is. I think that's certainly the best way, the honest way, and the decent way. But you have this bloodthirsty Azeris egged on by Erdogan of Turkey. And Turkey, as I've mentioned, has a history on this matter of killing Armenians. And I think that they are both guilty of the crime of aggression. The crime of aggression, which entered the power of the International Criminal Court jurisdiction in 2017. It's a recent power they have. If aggression by one country against another is sufficiently serious, then they can be prosecuted at the ICC. Now, it seems to me the evidence is overwhelming that Azerbaijan started the war. They did so at 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning in September, towards the end of September, backed by or incited by Erdogan, the Turkish president. But there is no doubt that the commanders, who of course Turkish companies provided mercenaries whom they paid from Syria and have given, have presented to the Azeri fighters. So there is no doubt that there is a war crime here that should be investigated, and Aliyev should be prime suspect. So that, how do you get the ICC? How do you get the International Criminal Court involved? Well, the first thing is to become a member of it. And it's been a big mistake by Armenia that it hasn't ratified the ICC treaty. So it can't ask for an investigation into attacks on its own country, or in, as the Azeris say, the occupied part of its own country of Nagorno-Karabakh. They claim it's in occupation. So the ICC, the prosecutor, could immediately investigate the crimes, war crimes, on in the battle for Nagorno-Karabakh, this battle. But the Armenia has to sign up. It can do so in a day, in a moment, as Palestine did when a few years ago. But that's the first step. Otherwise, the only way it can get to the ICC is from the Security Council. There could be a motion from the Security Council.
And so, quite frankly, let's spend a minute or two on that. What reasons has Armenia not to ratify the ICC treaty?
I don't think it's got any reason. 130 countries have. And my dealings years ago with Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh, I detected a malevolent presence of Russia looking over their shoulder. Now, Russia is the prime wrongdoer, going right back to Stalin. And Armenia has made the mistake of being part of a Russian treaty, and Russia has let it down. Russia has betrayed Armenia. It's got its own forces it's got a base in Armenia, but it sells billions of arms to Azerbaijan. It makes a fortune out of Azerbaijan. Mr. Putin's oligarchs work with the oligarchs in Baku, in Azerbaijan. And when Putin, a week or two ago, was asked, "What are you doing?" As guarantor of peace, he said, "Oh, well, we've got a treaty to support Armenia, but that doesn't include Nagorno-Karabakh." So he's washing his hands. And Russia is a false friend to Armenia, and perhaps Armenia will understand this now and look more to the European Union, which could be a real friend of Armenia. But Russia is a false friend, a betraying friend, and Armenia's problems, in my view, stem partly from Russia. So I think Russia likes the situation where it makes money. It sells the same arms to Armenia, but at a discount. So it profits. And I think that, if there could have been a settlement forced by Russia, but it's failed to act, and now Armenia is bloody and Nagorno-Karabakh is almost broken.
One of our other speakers mentioned what I quite liked. Russia really likes regional instability to sell overpriced security.
It's a good way of putting it. But now, if Russia still has time to act, and it's got to stop both Azerbaijan and Turkey, and it's got a historical wrong of its own making that it could. So, but anyway, it is, I think, Russia that's been reluctant to allow Armenia to sign up to the ICC because Russia hasn't. And I think that is the first thing that if I were advising the Armenian government, I'd do. I'd say, get on, sign up today so that the ICC can investigate these war crimes. I mean, there was a couple of, on film I saw a night or two ago, a couple of Armenian civilians who had their heads chopped off by the Azeri soldiers. That's a war crime. And there is no, and if Armenia signed up to the ICC, it would be able to investigate it and have those people caught on video, arrested and tried. This is a precious part of the world. It has the traces of a religious Armenian civilization that goes back to 300 AD. It's a beautiful little part of the world with its own spirit and history, and we just should not allow it to be snuffed out. It should be a World Heritage Area which is protected from the racial hatreds that have marked these two countries.